The Addams Family.
They're creepy, kooky, and have hidden secrets that will blow your mind. Here are 20 shocking, eerie facts that you didn't know about the original Addams Family, some of which will frighten you.
You don't want her to think you're square, do you?
Oh.
Then if you learn how to dance well, she'll think you're...
Number 20. From newspaper sketches to TV ghouls. The start of the Addams Family. A witchy housewife, a Frankenstein-like butler, and a wild uncle snoozing on a bed of nails. The Addams Family wasn't quite like anything we'd seen before, right? I, for one, had no idea what to make of it when it first aired on television in the 1960s. It was witty, strange, and fashionable in a gothic kind of way. Yet beneath all the quirks and the gothic allure, there was a heritage to the Addams Family that most of us never knew. Born in 1903, Charles Addams loved coffins, cemeteries, ghost stories, and spooky houses, which he so often broke into. But the one thing he loved more than scaring people was art. He drew cartoons for his high school paper and had already sold his first cartoon to The New Yorker, a major platform for American writers and top illustrators, before he even turned 21. Impressed by Addams' talent, the magazine persisted with him, and in 1938, he drew the first of what would become the Addams Family series in a one-panel gag format. Yes, feel free to roll back in shock. The Addams Family didn't start on TV, but in a series of 150 standalone single-panel comics. About half of these darkly humorous scenes were originally published in The New Yorker, starting in 1938 and continuing until their creator's passing in 1988. So, how did he get into television? In the early 1960s, NBC executive David Levy stumbled upon one of Charles Addams' books in a New York bookstore and instantly recognized that its dark humor and eccentric tone would be a perfect fit for television. After purchasing the book, Levy met Addams at the Plaza Hotel, where they discussed the possibility of adapting The Addams Family for the small screen. Though Addams had been approached by other networks in the past, he was intrigued by Levy's offer, especially since they shared a mutual friend in the famous author John O'Hara. But while Addams was the one who gave names to the delightfully strange family members, he had little involvement with the series after the NBC meetings. He also had the power to veto casting decisions and other aspects, but never exercised it. Looking back, it's probably because he never liked the show's direction. In fact, he criticized the characters for being half as evil as they were in his original comics, feeling that the show softened the darker elements that made them so unique. Despite Addams' reservations, though, the 1964 television adaptation introduced the eerie family to a much wider audience and was well received by the public. Producer Nat Perrin opted for a lighter, more comedic approach to the characters and storylines, veering away from the darker, more sinister tone that Addams had established. Stephen Cox later described the show as more zany than spooky, a shift that made it more accessible and entertaining for a mainstream television audience. But what do you think? Would you have preferred a darker, gloomy theme? While you're pondering on your answer, here's another shocking Addams TV secret that even the biggest of fans surely missed.
And as happy as a lark.
Number 19. The Addams Family characters were based on real people. Calling the Addams Family one of the most iconic television and film families might just be an understatement. 60 years have passed since the original series first hit the airwaves, and yet the Addamses are still everywhere. They've been reimagined countless times over the decades, most recently with Netflix's Wednesday, which has been stirring up quite a storm. Every Halloween, the Addamses, the eccentric wealthy family of lovable misfits, are at the center of the spooky season. But here's something that might surprise you. They're actually based on real life. And no, I'm not talking about the supernatural bits. There may be no Frankenstein's monster or witches among us, unfortunately. But the Addams Family has its roots in the real world. In the original Addams Family cartoons, Charles Addams delighted in putting his strange characters in everyday situations, like going to the beach or celebrating holidays, only to have them stand out comically and awkwardly in the normal world. Personally, though, I think it was a breath of fresh air. It showed that monsters, no matter how scary, can still be humans. But hey, there's more depth to it than meets the eye. Several of the Addams characters were subtly inspired by famous historical figures. Take Gomez Addams, for example, His fascination with the macabre mirrored the writings of philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who had a famously grim outlook on life and human nature. His precious wife and matriarch Morticia? The Gothic wife is as chilling as she is enchanting, but was a nod to writers like William Blake and Mary Shelley, whose work reveled in the dark and supernatural. And the Addams kids? They're not left out either. Wednesday's strong sense of justice echoes the ideas of philosopher John Locke, while Pugsley's mischievous nature and wild spirit bring to mind the scandalous poet Lord Byron. So you see, the Addams family had a surprisingly intellectual edge. But before we go into the next Addams secret, you might want to brace yourself for the biggest twist yet. Charles Addams hinted that Fester was a reflection of himself, just with a bit more hair. And then there's Morticia. Believe it or not, she was reportedly inspired by Addams' first wife, Barbara Jean Day. He described her as a cool, frosty type, but it was her exit that was most telling. Barbara left when Addams refused to adopt a child. Why, you ask? Well, he famously had no patience for children, even cordially detesting them, as rumors say. It's funny, isn't it? For a guy who made a fortune off a family, Charles Addams was hardly the family man himself. So, what can we make of all of this? Well, the Addams family may not represent a true story in the traditional sense. It is certainly a fascinating blend of personal experiences, historical influences, and creative genius. Charles Addams, along with the writers, producers, and artists who helped bring his work to life, drew inspiration from a vast array of sources, including his own life, philosophy, and literary figures. It's a family of misfits, yes, but one that continues to captivate and inspire, ensuring their place in pop culture for many years to come. Speaking of places, you're not going to believe what's next. Number 18. The house featured on the show was real. Would you be mad if I told you the Addams Family mansion is as iconic as the family itself? I hope not. Depicted as a decaying, haunted mansion with eerie creatures lurking at the top of the staircase, the humble abode set the stage for the family's macabre lifestyle. But while it's taken on many forms across various adaptations, from television shows to films and video games, I can't help feeling the original version stands out the most because of the origins and the specific nature of the house were explored more intimately. Fans were given a more intricate look at its haunted architecture and the strange world that the Addamses inhabit. Even the staircase was a treat. Here's where things get interesting. In the original series, the Addams Family mansion was famously located at 0001 Cemetery Lane. However, in reality, the producers used an exterior shot of a grand house at 21 Chester Place in Los Angeles, California. They employed a few film tricks, long before the magic of computers and CGI, to transform it into the spooky and iconic Addams Family home. Moving away from its original dilapidated appearance to a more polished museum-like setting, the design of the mansion was altered. It was filled with odd statues, strange trophies, and other quirky items to improve its eerie allure. One of the highlights was the playroom, complete with medieval racks, nail beds, iron maidens, and a stockade, all of which were designed for the Addams version of relaxing. Speaking of versions, the house was condemned yet again when the Addamses made a guest appearance in the new Scooby-Doo movies TV show. Moving on, while it's common knowledge that the original Addams show was shot in black and white, have you ever wondered what color the house actually was? Take a wild guess. Black? An eerie shade of gray? Wrong. The house was actually painted in vibrant pink, but viewers never caught on, thanks to the show's black and white format. Many of the items littered around the house were much brighter than you'd expect from a spooky show like the Addams. So, the next time you're in the neighborhood, make sure you stop by the old Addams Family house. There's a guide there who'd be glad to show you around the home. Nah, just kidding. The Los Angeles home was demolished soon after the show ended in the late 1960s, which was a real loss considering its iconic status. Number 17. The Addams Family and the Munsters shared more than you think. East Coast or West Coast, Star Wars or Star Trek, Coke or Pepsi, Marvel or DC, Nike or Adidas? Americans have been at each other's throats for decades, and in the world of classic TV rivalries, few debates were as fun as the Munsters versus the Addams Family. Fans of both shows couldn't help but draw comparisons, as both depicted delightfully spooky, unconventional families, but what might surprise you is that both shows premiered and aired during the same time frame. In fact, they debuted within a week of each other in 1964 and ran until 1966, setting the stage for one of the decade's biggest showdowns. They were so similar that both shows made a point of setting themselves apart by deliberately avoiding guest stars who had appeared on the competing series. Despite their overlapping airtimes, the two shows managed to capture different themes. The Munsters leaned more into campy humor, following a Frankenstein-inspired family with characters like Herman, Lily, and Grandpa. Meanwhile, the Addams Family had a darker, more gothic style with the eccentric aristocratic Addamses, including Gomez, Morticia, and the delightfully creepy Uncle Fester. Not that it mattered much. Despite attempts to set the two series apart, the general public always saw the Addams Family and the Munsters as practically interchangeable. Another interesting thing to note is how both shows chose to keep their families in black and white. Even though color TV was already on the rise, it allowed each show to maintain an eerie atmosphere that resonated with audiences, but it didn't age well. Color won at the end. At this point, I know you're thinking, why didn't the Addams Family and the Munsters just make one epic crossover? Both shows they had similar themes and huge fan bases, so crossover would have been a blast to watch, not to mention a moneymaker. To understand why it never happened, though, you have to consider the competitive spirit of the 1960s. The Addams Family aired on ABC, while the Munsters was a CBS show, and back then, ABC and CBS were fierce rivals. They battled for ratings, advertisers, and audience loyalty, and the idea of one network stars appearing on a competitor's show would have been unimaginable. In fact, I dare say show executives would likely balk at the very suggestion. It wasn't until the 1970s that things began to loosen up. Shows like Battle of the Network Stars let actors from different networks compete in charity events, and films like The Towering Inferno saw studios pooling their resources for big-budget productions. But by then, the Addams Family and the Munsters had come and gone, leaving fans to imagine what a crossover might have looked like. Would you love to have seen one, though? I know I would. Number 16. There was a black cloud hanging over the movie. Although this eerie take doesn't stem from the Addams Family TV show that aired in the 1960s, we wouldn't dare sit it out. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear black clouds? Weather forecast as signs of storms or rain? Well, in the Addams Family movie from 1991, the term took on a whole new meaning, something much more spooky. You know how people claim certain homes or places are haunted? It's often a quirky way to talk about old buildings or creepy locations. But the set of this movie had an almost cursed vibe to it. So much so that even the director felt like there was a black cloud hanging over production. Here's what happened. Owen Roizman, the film's original cinematographer, suddenly quit to work on another movie after director Barry Sonnenfeld fainted from exhaustion. Roizman didn't return, and in came Gail Tattersall to fill his boots. But soon after taking on the role, Tattersall had to pause production himself due to a severe sinus infection. And guess what? He never came back either. The seemingly endless production troubles forced Sonnenfeld to double up on jobs, taking on the cinematography role himself. He had to finish filming and directing the movie, a job that required enormous stamina, especially with the strange setbacks happening all around him. But just when the cast and crew thought the eerie incidents were behind them, things took on another unsettling turn. Raul Julia was to be the next victim. While playing as the iconic Gomez Adams on camera, a blood vessel burst in his eye out of nowhere. Shocking, right? Apart from being painful and unsettling, it also added an extra layer of tension, almost as if something strange had its grip on the production. It seemed like no matter what they did, odd occurrences would get in the way and disrupt their work. Would you blame them, though? 3 crises might hit at a pattern, but 4? And in such quick succession? Well, that's when things started to feel truly awful. As these unsettling events unfolded, Sonnenfeld couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Reflecting on his directing experience, he spoke of how it seemed as though a pervasive black cloud hung over the entire production. This catchy phrase stuck and became part of the film's lore, a haunting tale that felt almost as chilling as the Addams Family themselves. Who knows, maybe the spirit of the Addams clan was making its presence felt, adding an unsettling touch to the real-life drama. But while the so-called curse could have been just a series of unfortunate coincidences, it's hard to deny that the behind-the-scenes chaos became as iconic as anything that happened on screen. For fans of the Addams Family, these production woes only added to the movie's legendary status, turning it into an even spookier chapter in Hollywood history. And with that, we move to our next Addams secret, one you might find even harder to believe.
I never went to school, and look how I turned out.
Uncle Fester.
Number 15. The surprising casting of Uncle Fester. When you think of Uncle Fester from the Addams Family movies, the first image that probably comes to mind is the eccentric, lovable character played by Christopher Lloyd. And there's a simple reason. His hunched posture, wild hair, and quirky walk not only captured the hearts of audiences, but also made him a staple in the Addams Family ensemble. But hey, what if I told you that this iconic portrayal almost didn't happen? In fact, Sir Anthony Hopkins was reportedly offered the role of Uncle Fester before Christopher Lloyd, yet he turned it down. Now imagine how different the character would have been from Hopkins in the role. Would his version of Fester have been a more serious, perhaps darker character? Or would he have brought his own unique charm to it? It's a fascinating what if, but it's hard to picture anyone other than Lloyd in the role. His performance met all eccentricities and criteria for a successful Fester on screen that, for many, Christopher Lloyd and Uncle Fester are almost inseparable. It's also important to note that there's no real way of knowing if Hopkins would have been an upgrade. After all, the saying goes, the angel you know is better than the one you don't. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Do you remember the hunched, sagacious walk of Uncle Fester? Well, what if I told you that his iconic sway wasn't meant to add any edginess or mystery to the character, but rather to cover up one major casting flaw? Standing at a towering 6'1", Christopher Lloyd was taller than both his on-screen brother Gomez, played by the blood vessel-bursting Raul Julia, and the woman of the cast, including Angelica Houston as Morticia and Joan Cusack as the villainous Debbie Jelinski. But here's the catch. There was no computer trickery involved in making Lloyd seem shorter. To create the iconic squat look of Uncle Fester, Lloyd would instead bend his knees to achieve that signature hunch. This simple but effective technique resulted in the unique, slightly off-kilter gait we all associate with the character. And the best part? It perfectly matched Fester's whimsical, eccentric nature, turning a casting challenge into one of the character's most beloved traits. In line with his physical transformations, Lloyd, without any hesitation, also shaved his head to fully immerse himself in the Fester character. With such commitment to the character, it's hard to imagine anyone else bringing the same energy to the role. Would Fester have had the same charm if someone else had played him? We'll never know, but I think we can all agree Lloyd truly was the perfect choice. But here's the kicker. Lloyd wasn't the only one who almost didn't land their role. There was another iconic figure in the film who, much like him, almost didn't cast in a role that became synonymous with them. You might want to keep your eyes and ears grounded for this one. It is a shell-shocking surprise. Number 14. Cher was close to being Mortia Adams. Whether you're a Munsters fan or an Addams faithful, there's no denying the undeniable charm of the character created by Charles Addams. These eerie yet endearing figures have been staples since the 1930s, gracing magazines and newspapers before becoming truly immortalized in the iconic 1960s TV series. And when it comes to the best of the best, look no further than Mortia Adams. She was the star of the show, the most famous name, and the hauntingly glamorous matriarch of the entire clan. And we have Angelica Houston to thank for it. For many, Angelica Houston is the quintessential Morticia. Her striking height, enigmatic beauty, and captivating performance helped to bring the mysterious matriarch to life in a way that fans still can't imagine anyone else doing. But what if I told you that another major star was also vying for the role? Yes, believe it or not, the legendary singer Cher was reportedly in the running for Morticia, and she went all out to land the part. Can you picture it? Cher as the raven-haired, glamorous matriarch of the Addams family. Now that's a twist in the Addams folklore. Contrary to what you might believe, the iconic singer and actress was even more willing for the studio to have Cher portray Mortia Adams. Yet Barry Sonnenfeld and the other creators behind the film had a very clear vision: Angelica Houston. They feared casting Cher would unbalance the film, especially given they wanted to keep the focus on the family itself rather than letting a major star overshadow the story. Funny enough, Houston herself believed that Cher might have been a better fit for the role. In an interview, Houston shared that during a lunch with Sonnenfeld, Scott Rudin, and others, she asked why they didn't want Cher for Morticia. And to her surprise, they responded by saying, "No, we'd like you to do it." Despite her reservations about diving into another family-friendly film after her work on The Witches with Nicholas Roeg, Houston was drawn to the darker, more unique nature of the Addams Family, leading her to ultimately take on the role that would become so iconic. In any case, it's fascinating to think how different the film might have been with Cher in the role. Like Christopher Lloyd to Uncle Fester, Angelica Houston mirrored every single vibe and aura of Morticia Adams. It's no surprise she had millions of fans worldwide. Number 13. Angelica Houston's Morticia struggles. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry knows that the Addams Family was a commercial success, earning hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide. But have you ever thought about what sacrifices were necessary to ensure its success? Back in the day, getting into character required significant effort, both physically and mentally. And it was especially true for a show as spooky and detailed as The Addams Family. Every day, the actors of The Addams Family dedicated around 3 hours to hair and makeup to perfect their eerie and one-of-a-kind looks. And this wasn't just for a one-off shoot. It was a grueling process repeated for multiple episodes each season. Not only did they endure hours in a makeup chair every single day, but they also powered through countless retakes to perfect each spooky and comedic scene. Multiply that by the number of episodes in a season, and then again for 2 seasons. Finally, seeing why bringing this spooky family to life was nothing short of astonishing. The one person who had the most work done was easily Angelica Houston. The crew went to incredible lengths to bring Morticia's eerie elegance to life, employing custom lighting, intricate makeup techniques, and a hairstyle that gave her an ethereal, otherworldly glow. Remember Morticia's slanted eyes? The studio brought the effect to life by attaching an elastic strap to the back of Angelica Houston's head. Fabric tabs were glued at her temples, and the strap pulled the corners of her eyes upward, creating that iconic Morticia gaze. But while this added to the character's ethereal allure, it also contributed to the long, arduous makeup process that Houston endured daily during filming. Houston wore a metal corset that sculpted an exaggerated hourglass figure far beyond anything natural. On top of that, her daily routine included gauze eye lifts, neck tucks, and lengthy fake nails. The bands caused Houston significant anguish and would snap at the slightest motion of her head, necessitating a lengthy repair period. By lunchtime, she was suffering from severe headaches as a result of the bondages. She eventually learned how to rotate and turn on her feet, while keeping her upper body and head still. In today's film industry, extreme measures like those taken for the Addams Family's Morticia costume are much rarer. With the rise of digital effects and modern health and safety standards, the process of bringing characters to life has shifted away from physically demanding transformations. Angelica Houston's experience reflects a time when actors often endured discomfort, sometimes at the cost of their well-being, in order to fully embody a role. This level of dedication, although impressive, likely wouldn't be tolerated as easily today, where more focus is placed on the actor's comfort and the use of technology. Still, the hard work paid off. Houston earned 2 Golden Globe Award nominations for her portrayal as Morticia Adams, the perfect consolation to the pains and sweat she went through.
And for all these reasons, I've decided to scalp you and burn your village to the ground.
Number 12. The Addams Family Values Hidden Message. Say what you will about Addams Family Values, but it's much more than just a quirky sequel to the 1991 Addams Family film. Compared to its predecessor, which maintained some of the whimsical madcap energy of the 1960s sitcom, Addams Family Values leans into a much darker, more macabre brand of humor. While the family adjusts to the sequence of amusing and terrifying incidents following the birth of their new baby, Pubert, Uncle Fester falls for the new nanny, whose seemingly sweet demeanor hides her sinister intentions. Under its darkly comedic surface, it offers a sharp critique of the era's political climate, cleverly challenging the concept of family values that dominated American discourse in the early 90s. At first glance, Addams Family Values might appear to be just another slapstick comedy filled with quirky antics and dark humor. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find that the movie cleverly critiques societal norms, especially those surrounding family and morality. Allow me to paint the bigger picture. We can all agree that the heart of the film lies in its characters, right? Now, have you ever noticed the polarizing difference between the Addams Family and the mainstream American society of the time? The Addams Family may seem eccentric on paper, but they love, nurture, and accept each other's differences. It's an utter contrast to the normative families around them who, although outwardly perfect, are so often shallow and hypocritical. Remember Wednesday Addams' rebellion at her summer camp? For those who may not recall, Camp Chippewa represents the typical American family ideal, one rooted in rigid conservative ideals that frequently exclude and discourage uniqueness, and that is precisely where Wednesday comes in. Her caustic and sardonic manner not only criticized the camp's false cheerfulness, but it also revealed the weaknesses in these so-called family values. The theme is further emphasized in the film's Thanksgiving play scene, where Wednesday's role in a colonial reenactment sees her confront the absurdities of traditional American values head-on. Her performance, which distills the harsh truths about the history and treatment of Native Americans, is a biting commentary on the sanitized narratives published by mainstream culture. Peak writing, wouldn't you say? Rudnick, recognizing the film as an opportunity to challenge the prevailing cultural narrative around family and morality, cleverly used the Addams family's dark humor to deliver a biting social commentary. He observed that in conservative circles, the term family values often translated into censorship and the exclusion of non-traditional family structures, including LGBTQ+ families. Against this backdrop was the Addams Family, who loved and accepted one another despite their oddities. Did you know the film also challenged themes of materialism and self-serving behavior through its antagonist, Debbie Jelinski? As a gold-digging femme fatale, Debbie is not just the polar opposite of the Addams family's loving, unconventional familial relationships, but also a sarcastic commentary on American materialism, greed, and the darker side of the pursuit of the American dream. Finally, Addams Family Values is a darkly comic and politically astute examination of the family values movement. By comparing the Addams family's unconditional love with the superficiality of conservative ideas, the film promotes a progressive, inclusive view of family that prioritizes acceptance above conformity. Its comedy, wit, and sarcasm push spectators to reconsider society's standards, making it a unique treasure among family comedies. Number 11. Fester's Mandela Effect. Quick question. How much do you know about Uncle Fester, apart from the fact that he's said to be Gomez Addams' older brother? I mean, sure, there's the fact that he's recognizable by his eccentric behaviors, like turning the shower to a special scalding setting, lighting up bulbs by sticking them in his mouth, feeding his garden plants blood plasma, or even releasing an eagle on the neighbor's homing pigeons. He's never really part of the family celebrations, except, of course, when he's pouring boiling oil on carolers. Oh, and don't forget that time he went fishing with the kids using dynamite. Classic Fester stuff, right? But is there more to him than meets the eye? Any Fester secret we've missed? No? Well then brace yourselves, because you've been tricked from the very beginning. Fester is not Gomez Addams' older brother. I mean, sure, that's how we know him now, but it wasn't always the case. In the original 1960s sitcom, Uncle Fester was actually Mortia Adams' maternal uncle, but was later changed in films and animated content. Funny enough, there are even more discrepancies. In one episode, he's completely baffled when asked for his last name, suggesting he either doesn't have one or has simply forgotten it. Yet he frequently talks about the Addams family history on other episodes as if it's his own. It's only in the flashbacks of Morticia's romance that the truth finally comes out, revealing that Uncle Fester is actually Morticia's uncle. But as always with the Addams family, things aren't as straightforward as they seem. Throughout the show's run, Uncle Fester often teamed up with various members of the Addams family, be it his brother Gomez, Morticia, or Grandmama, showing no real preference for any one of them. This unpredictable and mysterious nature of his character is what makes him so endlessly intriguing. You never quite know which side of the family he's going to lean into, and that's part of what made him so memorable. But before we go into the next Addams secret, have you ever wondered what Uncle Fester's childhood was like? Well, me too. Not much was said about it, but we do know a few intriguing details. For starters, his father, Grandpa Droop, was an incredibly strict man. He disciplined Fester harshly, paddling him even when he behaved well, and paid him to stay out of the public eye. He also refused to allow Fester to touch a battle axe, a treasured toy in the Addams family's eerie household, until he was 8 years old. Now, it sounds a bit harsh, but Fester, surprisingly, took it quite well. He even defended his father's strict methods as an adult and pointed to his success as proof of its effectiveness.
We may be together for a while.
All our lives, Carabia.
What?
Monsieur.
Speak English!
Pumpkin.
And if I have to be seen with you, we need to make some changes.
Changes?
Number 10. Christopher Lloyd was scared to play Uncle Fester. Would you agree with me if I told you Uncle Fester was one of the most memorable faces in the 1960s? If so, would you then agree it was all because of Christopher Lloyd, the face behind the magic trick? Fester's offbeat personality combined with Lloyd's comedic timing was a treat and unsurprisingly garnered a loyal following from both viewers and cast members alike. Would you blame them though? Who else could offer quirky mannerisms, deadpan humor, and outrageous antics like Lloyd's Fester? However, with an actor as iconic as him, it's almost shocking to think he was scared of portraying Uncle Fester, arguably the most important character in his rich filmography. Yes, you heard right. When Lloyd was initially cast as Fester for director Barry Sonnenfeld's Addams Family, he wasn't quite as confident. Lloyd had a deep admiration for the character from Charles Addams' original comics and dreamed of portraying him, but he had serious doubts about whether he could actually pull off the role. It wasn't that he doubted his acting abilities, it was more about the physical requirements. To be fair, he didn't exactly match the archetypal Fester image. With his sharp features and slender frame, he was a stark contrast to the rotund, bald version of Fester in the comics. This left Lloyd so concerned that he wasn't sure he'd even make it through production. Those anxieties reached a peak when he received a phone call to meet with Sonnenfeld and producer Scott Rudin. Upon arrival, Lloyd was greeted by a man who, without any makeup or prosthetics, looked exactly like Uncle Fester. Round-faced, bald head, the works. Lloyd's mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. He was being replaced. What could be worse for an actor than feeling like you've been outshone by someone who looks exactly like the character? Fortunately, those fears were soon dispelled. Sonnenfeld and Rudin weren't replacing Lloyd, they simply wanted to remove the heavy prosthetics that were limiting his facial expressions. And oh, contrary to Lloyd's fears, his expressive face and physical attributes were appreciated by the director. They believed it was more suited for Fester than the artificial roundness of the makeup. Looking back, it's crazy how little details like these could have altered one of the greatest shows in the 1960s forever. Fester may never have been so loved if Lloyd got replaced, because once the prosthetics were off, the star's performance truly came to life. His exaggerated gestures and cartoonish expressions made him even more memorable than the comic counterpart. In the end, Lloyd's fears about being replaced were entirely unfounded, and his portrayal goes to show how different interpretations can bring new life to beloved characters. The moral here? Sometimes staying true to the essence of a character means stepping away from the perfection and embracing the quirks that make you stand out. If you're a fan of Uncle Fester, you're gonna love this one. Number 9. Uncle Fester has a law named after him. Hiring child actors can be a pretty tricky experience when compared to working with other performers. There's been multiple occasions in Hollywood's history where underage performers were treated badly by studio executives, cast members, and even their own parents. Child labor regulations, all of which producers must carefully navigate, exist to protect the rights of children. There are a handful of bills still in law nowadays, but one of them was enacted because of Jackie Coogan, the actor who played Uncle Fester. Coogan began his acting career as a child star in silent films, including a memorable performance opposite Charlie Chaplin in The Kid. But by the time he grew up, he was devastated to learn that his parents had squandered all of the millions of dollars he earned as a child. Determined to prevent this exploitation from happening to other child actors, Coogan fought for legal reform, which led to the passing of the Coogan Act, also known as the California Child Actors Bill. It ensures that a portion of a child actor's earnings is set aside in a trust, protecting them financially as they grow up. For those unfamiliar, this law is designed to protect child actors from exploitation and abuse during their time working on set. Unlike traditional child labor laws, which focus on how many hours a minor can work or how much they are paid, the Coogan law specifically addresses the financial aspect. It mandates that employers set aside 15% of a child actor's gross earnings in a Coogan trust account where it can be monitored, but not withdrawn, by a legal guardian until the child reaches legal maturity. It's kind of like a safeguard that ensures the earnings made while they're young are protected from mismanagement or potential exploitation by their guardians. That said, it's important to note that the 15% requirement does not apply to a child who's either an extra or background actor. For instance, if your child actor is an extra earning about $200 a day, depositing 15% of that $200 into a Coogan account is by no means necessary. In any case, the Coogan law was a massive step in the right direction. Matter of fact, if it had been implemented earlier, it could have prevented the financial exploitation many child actors endured at the hands of parents or guardians who mismanaged or squandered their earnings. By mandating that a portion of a child actor's income be placed in a trust until they reach adulthood, the law not only protects their financial future, but also grants them autonomy to reap the rewards of their labor. With proper financial training, these young performers could learn to invest wisely and grow their wealth even if they struggle to make a successful adult career in entertainment.
Tell me you love me, Lurch. Tell me. Oh, say it again.
Number 8. Ted Cassidy played 2 different roles on the show. Moving away from Uncle Fester, can we just give a round of applause to Ted Cassidy for not only playing one of the most iconic characters in the Addams Family TV show, but also secretly bringing another to life. Oh, you didn't know about that? Well, that's why you've got us. Ted Cassidy didn't just play the towering and unforgettable deadpan butler Lurch, he was also the man behind Thing. Yeah, the disembodied hand that became a big part of the Addams family's spooky yet charming household. As a matter of fact, Thing is so iconic within Addams Family folklore that he played a major role in Netflix's recent adaptation, Wednesday. I'm not going to drop a bombshell by spoiling the series, but hey, if you're a fan of the Addams Family, Wednesday, or even Thing himself, then what are you waiting for? I digress. Playing Thing wasn't as simple as sticking out his hand, though. As Cassidy's tall 6'9" stature was a technical difficulty to film, most of the time he would lie on his back on a wheeled trolley concealed from the camera, while his arms slipped up through the bottom of a box or another prop, revealing only his hand. It was a tricky setup, but Cassidy's ability to imbue even a hand with personality made it work. The effort was so convincing that Thing was credited as itself at the end of each episode, adding to the character's mystique. But wait, there's one more truth bomb. Cassidy had to step aside whenever Lurch and Thing needed to appear in the same scene. In these instances, associate producer Jack Vogelin stepped in as the hand. But there are also rumors that at least one more actor occasionally played the part, but their identity has remained a mystery. As a bonus reveal, did you ever notice how Cassidy sometimes swapped hands? Yup, Thing was normally seen as a right hand, but sometimes Cassidy swapped it with his left just to see if anyone would catch on. It's a small yet clever touch that speaks to his sense of humor and dedication to his roles. Whether he was silently stealing the show as Lurch or literally lending a hand as Thing, Cassidy's contributions to the Addams Family were nothing short of extraordinary. Along with lovely, talented cast members, Cassidy and the spooky Addams Family gave us quality years of entertainment and swashbuckling fun. Giving him a sitting ovation is the least we can do. Number 7. The Addamses were the first family to own a home computer. Do you remember when I told you one of the key differences between the Munsters and the Addams family was that the latter were wealthy aristocrats with money to burn? Lots of it? Take, for instance, Gomez Adams. He's athletic, acrobatic, and an eccentric multi-billionaire. Despite being an extraordinarily successful businessman, much of Gomez Adams' wealth stems from inheritance and impulsive investments rather than meticulous financial strategy. His carefree attitude toward money is evident in his tendency to spend thousands on spur-of-the-moment endeavors. Yet he's incredibly lucky. His investments are often driven by his whims, but fortune seems to favor him consistently. His diverse portfolio includes a swamp purchased purely for its scenic charm, a crocodile farm, a buzzard farm, a salt mine, a tombstone factory, and even a uranium mine, among countless others. His eccentric wealth even caught the attention of Forbes, which ranked him number 12 on their 2007 Fictional 15 list of the richest fictional characters, estimating his net worth at an impressive $2.5 billion. Back in the day, one of the ultimate luxuries for affluent families wasn't just owning the fanciest cars or the newest gadgets. It was having the latest and greatest technology. Whether it was colored televisions or home computers, these items screamed, "We've got money." And as it turns out, the Addams family took this trend to a whole new level by being the first family on TV to own a home computer. In the iconic 90th episode of the show, The Addams Family Splurges, the family is seen using a universal automatic computer, or UNIVAC for short, named Wizzo. And get this, she wasn't just for showing off. The family used her to calculate the cost of an extravagant vacation to the moon. Yeah, you read that right, the Addams were just that rich. Later, Wizzo made another appearance in the second season in the episode Gomez, the People's Choice. In this storyline, Gomez decides to run for mayor, and Uncle Fester moves Wizzo into the family's living room to act as Gomez's very own political machine. Somehow it works, at least well enough to get Gomez close to victory. For a family as bizarre and delightfully unconventional as the Addams, wouldn't you say it was the perfect way to blend cutting-edge technology with their eccentric lives? Now here's the funny part. Back in the 1960s, first-generation computers like the UNIVAC were not used in homes. These machines were massive, often filling entire rooms, and required specialized environments like air-conditioned spaces to operate. They were also prohibitively expensive and complex, requiring trained operators and programmers to function. UNIVACs were primarily used by governments, large corporations, and research institutions for tasks such as census data processing, scientific calculations, and business applications. It wasn't until the late 1970s, with the advent of smaller, more affordable microcomputers like the Apple II and the Commodore PET, that computers made it to people's homes. Still, they were seen as the ultimate status symbols. They were massive, complicated machines that were more about flexing wealth than practical home ownership. Owning one was a sign you had money to spare, even though they were unreliable and are hilariously primitive compared to today's technology. What was once seen as a symbol of futuristic luxury now feels like a relic from a bygone era, a toy compared to the sleek machines we use daily. It really makes you wonder what the next 30 years will bring. Will our beloved smartphones, virtual reality headsets, and cutting-edge AI assistants look like outdated relics in the future? Whatever comes next, it's safe to say we'll look back at today's technology and chuckle at how far we've come. Speaking of chuckles, here's a rather funny Addams secret.
I can sympathize with her. I know how irresistible you are.
No, not that. This. Number 6. John Aston's suit pockets were lined with asbestos. Hollywood has had a long-standing love affair with cigarettes and alcohol. From its earliest days, the industry often glamorized these vices, with countless films featuring suave actors and elegant actresses puffing away in iconic scenes. Smoking in particular became a symbol of masculinity, rebellion, and charm. For a time, it wasn't just a cinematic trope, it was the essence of stardom. But have you ever stopped to wonder what happened to all those cigarettes after a scene? Did actors stub them out, finish them, or keep puffing away? In the case of John Aston, who played the delightfully eccentric Gomez Adams, something quite innovative yet amusing transpired. Due to the fact that Adams Gomez was rarely seen without his trademark cigar, John Aston had to smoke a lot of times, which presented a unique challenge. Cigars, as you might guess, are a bit of a fire hazard, especially on a busy set filled with flammable props and costumes. So to protect the crew whilst promoting Gomez's habits, the props department had a novel solution, ingeniously lining the pockets of Aston's suits with asbestos. Yes, asbestos, the same material now infamous for being highly toxic. Back then, though, it was widely used for its heat-resistant properties. This allowed Aston to safely extinguish his cigars in his pockets without the risk of setting himself ablaze. Interestingly, Aston was no stranger to cigars in real life, so perhaps having a handy way to dispose of them was an added perk of the job. Now that I'm thinking about it, though, it's kind of funny how lots of adjustments had to be made to mirror the Addams Family members. Why, you may ask? Well, it's a big rival. The Munsters also had some real issues with wardrobe. Fred Gwynne may have been a big guy, but he was in no way close to Herman Munster. Elevator boots added 4 inches to his 1.96 meter frame, and he also had to wear gigantic padded pieces to the shoulders of his clothing. The padding was so thick that when in combination with the heat from the lighting, Fred Gwynne began to lose a lot of weight. It was so bad that the crew had to give him glass after glass of lemonade and salt tablets and have an air hose injected inside his costume to keep him cool enough to continue shooting. In any case, while the idea of asbestos-lined pockets in Aston's suit might sound shocking today, it was an unconventional stroke of brilliance for its time, and one that perfectly matched the show's spirit. Now that you know this quirky bit of Addams Family trivia, are you currently wondering how actors managed not to get addicted to smoking, considering how much they did it on set? Well, the simple answer is, they didn't. Many actors of the golden age of Hollywood were, in fact, hooked on smoking, and this brings us to our next Addams Family secret, one that'll have you looking at Aston in a whole new light. Number 5. Playing Gomez Adams helped John Aston stop smoking. Even decades after the Addams Family first graced television screens, the kooky family remains a beloved cultural phenomenon. With its numerous TV and movie adaptations, the franchise meant a great deal to generations. But while you'd be forgiven to think the role was a mere career highlight to its actors, the truth is that the show was one of the biggest things to happen to them, especially John Aston. Throughout its various adaptations, the characters of the Addams Family have stayed true to Charles Addams' original cartoons. However, in live-action portrayals, actors like Raul Julia, Glenn Taranto, and Tim Curry have drawn clear inspiration from John Aston's interpretation of Gomez. Aston infused so much of his own personality into the character, including Gomez's cigar-smoking habit, which became one of the most defining traits of any character in the series. Did he hate it, though? Certainly not. Aston, who was already a cigar smoker when he took on the role, believed cigars were essential to Gomez's persona, as much as his mustache. He felt that long cigars embodied elegance, which perfectly fit with the aristocratic aesthetic of the Addams Family. And then it happened. The constant repetition of lighting cigars for take after take on the set had an unintended, ironic consequence. Aston developed a distaste for cigars. Shortly after the show ended, he decided to quit smoking cigars altogether. Although he briefly resumed smoking in his late 30s and early 40s, he ultimately gave it up entirely and maintained his smoke-free lifestyle well into old age. No more tobacco, cigars, or cigarettes. He lived clean and healthy. Personally, though, I think it's rather fascinating how embodying a character as outlandish as Gomez Adams could lead to such a significant change. Who knew the most effective way to make a heavy smoker actually quit smoking was the sheer frequency of cigar lighting while in character? And considering that Aston turned 90 years old in 2020, it seems this lifestyle adjustment worked in his favor. So as much as the Addams Family brought laughter and delight to millions, it also gifted its leading man a healthier, longer life. A testament to how even the most unexpected aspects of art can ripple into personal transformation. If you've made it this far, chances are you're loving today's video. So why don't you smash the subscribe button and turn on post notifications to ensure you wouldn't be left out whenever we release an even better video. It's free, only takes a second, and will lead to a whole new world of good and entertainment. Number 4. Lurch's catchphrase was a mistake. Though not the centerpiece of the Addams Family, Lurch, the towering, brooding butler, easily became a fan favorite. And really, who could blame viewers? Portrayed by the versatile Ted Cassidy, Lurch captured hearts with his unique mix of humor and unwavering loyalty. While he could speak perfectly well when needed, his signature inarticulate moans became a defining trait, adding to his charm. Interestingly, the Addams Family themselves always seemed to understand him perfectly, often praising him as both eloquent and vivacious, a delightful contradiction, if you ask me. When he's not assisting the kids on and off the school bus, Lurch works about the home like any other butler, cleaning and fixing. His large bulk and strength might pose problems at times, and yes, he certainly takes pleasure in his job regardless of how difficult the task is. Who says a dog is man's best friend? It's clearly Lurch. He's extremely devoted to his employers, and the family regards him as one of their own. Now, don't take this to mean Lurch's role as the family's butler was only about fulfilling mundane household tasks, though. Lurch was pivotal in many of their affairs and was the go-to fixer when things went wrong. Fans especially enjoyed the humorous gong called by the noose-shaped bell pull, which signaled Lurch's sudden, if implausibly quick, appearance. But here's where things get interesting. One of the most memorable parts of Lurch was not even in the original script. Puzzled? Okay, let me bring you up to speed. Do you recall Ted Cassidy's popular catchphrase, "You rang"? Well, of course you do. It's one of the show's most memorable two-word quotes, yet it was never part of the original script. In fact, it came about almost by accident. Originally, Lurch was meant to be completely mute, a brooding figure who let his imposing presence do all the talking. But everything shifted during the filming of the pilot episode. Ted Cassidy, ever the creative performer, ad-libbed the now famous line in his deep, resonant voice. The producers were so impressed with how much it added to Lurch's persona that they made it a recurring element throughout the series. And just like that, two simple words became one of the most memorable moments in the Addams Family history. As if the character's popularity couldn't get any higher, Lurch's fame extended beyond the walls of the Addams Family mansion and into the real world with the advent of the dance craze The Lurch in 1965. It was sparked by the episode Lurch the Teenage Idol, in which the family's brooding butler unexpectedly becomes a pop sensation. Riding the wave of this unexpected stardom, Capitol Records released a novelty single titled The Lurch, performed by Ted Cassidy himself. The song and its accompanying quirky dance moves quickly caught on, making Lurch not just a beloved TV character, but a bona fide pop culture icon in the 1960s. It was a moment that cemented his status in both television and the broader cultural landscape, proving that even the quietest members of the Addams Family could make some serious noise. Number 3. Grandmama is younger than her on-screen daughter. You didn't think we would talk about the top 20 most shocking secrets of the Addams Family without mentioning Grandmama, did you? Come on, that would be impossible. She's an integral part of what makes the Addams Family household so delightfully macabre. A witch by trade, Grandmama is always brewing something bizarre in her cauldron, performing spells, or offering unconventional advice to her peculiar family. But hey, here's one twist that we're sure you would never expect. Grandmama, despite her age-defying presence on screen, was actually younger than her on-screen daughter. That's right. When Carol Kane replaced Judith Malina in the role, she brought her unique comedic flair to the character. However, Kane was 11 months younger than Angelica Houston, who portrayed her daughter, Mortia Adams. The two actresses had a long history as friends dating back to their teenage years. It gets even more interesting when you learn about Kane's connection to another Addams cast member. She had previously worked with Christopher Lloyd, who played Uncle Fester, on the classic sitcom Taxi, making the Addams Family reunion even more special for fans. Now, let's dig into some more behind-the-scenes tidbits. Kane, as we mentioned, wasn't the original Grandmama. Judith Malina had already played the role, with much discomfort. She worked grueling 12-hour days while caked in latex. That was probably tough, but Houston said that Malina had a means of managing the pain during the shoot. Curious to know her strange coping mechanism? Well, let's just say that she rolled joint after joint in her trailer whenever she wasn't needed on set. But wait, there's more. Isn't it funny how the Addams Family and the Munsters share yet another quirky similarity? In the Munsters, Grandpa Munster, played by Al Lewis, was actually younger than his on-screen daughter, Lily Munster. And here we have Grandmama being younger than Morticia. It seems like being younger than your child is just one more delightful twist in the world of 1960s creepy comedies. But guys, we're not done yet. Stick around, because the 2 final secrets about the Addams Family will leave you even more amazed. Number 2. The real reason why the Addams Family TV show was canceled. Loved by millions of viewers across the world, the Addams Family was one of the most intriguing TV series of the 1960s. But its abrupt cancellation after just 2 seasons begs the question, what really happened? No official explanation was ever provided for the abrupt end, but a few theories paint a clearer picture. For starters, the Addams Family faced stiff competition from a colorful new contender, Batman. Premiering in 1966 on ABC, Batman was unlike anything else on TV at the time. Though Batman had already been adapted for the screen in the 1940s, the debut of a new program piqued people's interest because it aired at a time when superhero stories were uncommon. Many of the popular 1960s shows like I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched were similar to the Munsters and the Addams Family in the sense that they had a spooky bent to them, so Batman offered a fresh type of adventure. Everyone wanted to see Adam West's Batman and Burt Ward's Robin in color because it felt like the original comic pages had come to life. Speaking of color, 1966 marked a turning point in television as networks began transitioning to color programming. And considering the show's ratings had already begun to slip, the Addams Family ranked 23rd in its first season but dropped out of the top 30 in its second, networks likely deemed it unworthy of the cost. And don't even get me started on the fact that Charles Addams, the creator of the original Addams Family cartoons, wasn't thrilled with the TV adaptation either. He criticized the show for portraying the characters as being half as evil as their comic counterparts. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying his dissatisfaction directly led to the cancellation, but it hinted at a creative disconnect that might have influenced the series' trajectory. Whether or not Batman is responsible for bringing down 2 of TV's main monster family titans, the timing of its success is hard to ignore. One thing is clear though, Lurch would surely crush the Caped Crusader in a dancing competition any day.
Lurch, the music has stopped.
No, but I can't.
And speaking of dancing moves, don't move a muscle. We're about to uncover one of the most jaw-dropping secrets about the Addams Family yet. Number 1. The tragic end of Charles Addams. Whether you love or hate Charles Addams, one thing you can't deny about the man, apart from his talent, is that he lived an intriguing life off the page as well. Described as sociable and debonair, Addams was far from the dark, sinister character his cartoons suggested. Biographers painted him as a well-dressed, courtly gentleman with silvery, back-combed hair and a gentle manner, which stood in stark contrast to the fiends and grotesque creatures he often depicted. And guess what? He had a reputation as a lady killer, not only in his work, but also in his personal life. Addams was known to accompany renowned women like Greta Garbo, Joan Fontaine, and Jacqueline Kennedy to social gatherings. And yes, in the years following the death of Nelson Rockefeller, Addams dated Megan Marshak, the aide who had been with Rockefeller at the time of his passing. But hey, even the hardest of players end up falling for the warmth of a woman's heart. By 1943, he met his first wife, Barbara Jean Day, who was said to bear a striking resemblance to Mortia Adams, the character who would later become one of his most famous creations. However, their marriage ended after 8 years, primarily because Addams, despite the success of his family show, didn't like children and was particularly adamant about not having any. After their divorce, Barbara Jean Day went on to marry John Hersey, a colleague at The New Yorker and the author of the book Hiroshima. In turn, Addams marked yet another chapter with a Barbara in his life by walking Barbara Barb down the aisle in 1954. Who would have thought that the Addams creator unapologetically had a type? Anyway, the sudden cancellation of the Addams Family in 1966 brought a significant financial setback for Charles Addams. The show was his major source of income, and like every human, the man needed his bills paid. At least he had a wife who could cover up for him in his downtime, right? Right? In the cruelest twist of fate yet, Barbara Barb, who was a practicing lawyer, proved to be a cunning figure in Addams' personal life. Known for her diabolical legal scheming, Barbara managed to convince Addams to sign away the rights to future adaptations of his beloved characters, as well as some of his other cartoons. At one point, she even got him to take out a $100,000 insurance policy. Sensing something was amiss, Addams sought advice from a lawyer in secret, who humorously likened the situation to the plot of Double Indemnity, the classic film where Barbara Stanwyck's character plots her husband's death. The couple eventually divorced in 1956, though the financial and emotional fallout lingered for Addams. Worse, Barbara remained in possession of the rights until 1991, when she sold them to allow the development of the Sonnenfeld films. Charles Addams sadly passed away on September 29, 1988, at age 76 from a heart attack shortly after parking his car. He died in the emergency room after being rushed from his apartment. Requesting a wake instead of a funeral, Addams wished to be remembered as a good cartoonist. His ashes were cremated and scattered in the pet cemetery at the Swamp home in accordance with his wishes. And there you have it, 20 shocking facts about the original Addams Family that you probably didn't know. If this video gave you a spine-chilling surprise, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which fact blew your mind the most. But don't scurry off just yet, there's even more to uncover. Be sure to check out the next video popping up on your screen for another chilling ride through Hollywood history.